May or may not have been the case with my third novel, which was published the same week I discovered my husband's affair with my best friend. In many ways, I felt the ultimate failure was mine. Over the course of several years, I chose to focus on my art instead of on my marriage. Though my husband was the one to cheat, I was not entirely blameless. My disloyalty to our union, privileging our conversations as fodder for material, for instance, rather than investing in them as a means to repair, preceded his own. For nearly a year after my divorce, I worked on the Swanee essay with Adam, and the process was an undeniably therapeutic one. By the time it was published, I felt I'd turned a corner. I didn't cry when my ex-husband called me. I didn't cry when I cooked dinner alone. I didn't cry when my mother asked if I was eating enough or working out too much, or if I'd started vomiting again. I didn't even cry on the one occasion I agreed to have drinks with my ex-husband and my former best friend. By then, I only ever felt a jab of pain when people would ask, having read my essay, "But what's the real story? What really went on between the three of you?" What they wanted to know, as one especially candid reader put it, were the nasty bits. In other words, they wanted to know the details. But also, I think they wanted to know how those details could be shuffled and reshuffled into the characters' different perceptions of reality. To be honest, so did I. A healthy habit or not, it's in my nature to play conversations over and over in my head. In the pages that follow are the conversations I remember most vividly from the 10 years I spent with my husband. Taking great liberties, and very likely getting much of it wrong, these imperfectly recollected exchanges, in person, by phone, and by text, are between my husband, my best friend, my sister, other friends, parents, counselors, and me. Sometimes they are imagined from whole cloth, as when I attempt to reconstruct the discussion between my husband and best friend that may have led to their initial infidelity. And sometimes they are recalled as clearly and honestly as if they'd taken place just last night, as when my husband suggested we have a baby in order to curb our excessive drinking habits. Collectively, these conversations are meant to provide the substance and context of a marriage that was destined to fail from the beginning, and a friendship that was doomed to end in betrayal. What began as a response to curious readers has since morphed into an investigation into the intersection of memory, self, honesty, and personal accounting. An investigation that sharply questions the legitimacy, ownership, and accuracy of personal and shared memories. During our divorce, and as we went about the arduous task of uncoupling our lives, my husband and I had plenty of opportunities to argue. We had plenty of opportunities to rehash how and why we'd gotten where we were. Most maddening to me during these arguments, more even than his infidelity, was his insistence on a version of our marriage that completely clashed with mine. Most maddening to him, he told me later, was my unwillingness even to entertain his point of view. After our divorce, I didn't immediately stop hearing my husband's voice in my head, or stop guessing how he might respond to something I'd read or heard or said if he'd still been in the room to hear me say it. I didn't overnight stop thinking of the things that might turn him thoughtful or make him laugh. Especially when I took our dog for walks alone, I thought about him, thought about the conversations we weren't having, and I allowed myself to invent both sides. Not as two people still together, but as two people who'd spent a decade together and who were now suddenly apart. Maybe this is just an elaborate way of admitting that I missed him and that, in missing him, I did what I naturally do. I wrote him down. Without his permission, I recreated him, trying to conjure up this new version of him with which to have a final exchange. I'm a firm believer that in the particular, we find the universal. In what follows, I've concentrated on a string of echoing events that happened to a particular person. This person. But my hope is that by listening to one individual's detailed mental maneuvering, listeners might begin to ask themselves more intimate and provocative questions about their own decision-making processes and their own relationship to experience, accuracy, and the intentions of memory.